I always thought I was doing everything right. Working hard, saving money, being responsible. That's what adults do, right? At least that's what I kept telling myself for the last decade while working 60-hour weeks at my accounting firm. My name is Noadia Meko. I'm 30 years old, single, and as of 2 weeks ago, the proud owner of an apartment. When my grandmother passed away, she left me a modest inheritance. It wasn't enough to change my life, but it was enough to cover a significant portion of the cost of a home. I've been saving religiously since my first job at 22, living in a small studio, bringing homemade lunches, and saying no to vacations that my friends took without a second thought. While others were posting Instagram photos from Bali or buying designer clothes, I was working overtime and putting every extra euro into my savings account. So when I finally gathered the funds, 300,000 euros to be exact, I bought my dream apartment, mortgage-free, debt-free. All mine. It's a 2-bedroom place about 10 minutes from my office in a neighborhood that isn't luxurious, but is clearly improving. The previous owners had horrible taste in wallpaper, and the kitchen needed a remodel, but I didn't mind. I decided to do the renovations myself to save money. YouTube tutorials had become my evening entertainment. I was in the middle of tearing off that hideous floral wallpaper when my phone rang. It was my mother. "Noelia, darling, I need you to come home next Saturday for a family gathering," she said in that fake, casual tone she uses when she's up to something. "Family gathering? What's going on?" I asked, stopping my renovation work. "It's a surprise. Just make sure you're here at 4, and bring one of those chocolate cakes from the bakery downtown, near your new apartment." "Mom, seriously? What's it about?" I insisted, already suspicious. "Just a small family gathering. Your sister will be here with Alvaro, and I've also invited your aunts, uncles, and cousins." That made me raise my eyebrows. The entire extended family for a small gathering? "Mom, is it a secret?" "No, Elia. It's a surprise. Just come." "Yes," and she hung up. I shrugged and went back to the wallpaper. Whatever drama my mother was cooking up would have to wait. I had a house to fix. My sister, Claudia, is 3 years younger than me, 27, and has been dating Alvaro for about 4 years. They live in a rented apartment in the city center. Unlike me, Claudia has always had it easier. She was a cheerleader in high school while I was on the debate team. She dropped out of college to find herself while I worked hard to finish my accounting degree. And somehow, our parents never seemed bothered by that. Growing up, it was always Claudia this, Claudia that. When we were little and both had dance recitals the same weekend, which one do you think my parents attended? When we graduated, my parents threw Claudia a huge party for finishing high school, while my college graduation was celebrated with dinner at El Olivo restaurant. I still remember my 16th birthday when they gave me a used bicycle, while Claudia got a car for hers. The following year, when I asked why, they said Claudia needed more help getting around for her social activities, as if my debate tournaments and volunteering at the library didn't count. But I've never been one for making a scene. I just worked harder, saved more, and proved I could take care of myself. The week flew by as I continued working on my apartment. I managed to remove all the wallpaper and started applying primer for painting. The sense of accomplishment I felt seeing my progress was worth every blister on my hands. When Saturday arrived, I woke up early to finish painting the living room before going to my parents' house. I stopped at the bakery as requested and picked up a chocolate cake with buttercream frosting, my mother's favorite. As I drove towards my childhood home, I wondered what this mysterious family gathering could be about. My parents' house is a 2-story colonial-style house that my grandmother left to Claudia and me when she passed away. We let our parents continue living there, of course. It never occurred to me to do otherwise. The house was full of childhood memories, both good and bad. Arriving at the entrance, I saw several cars already parked. I recognized Uncle Antonio's truck and Aunt Beatrice's minivan. My cousin Yvonne's motorcycle was leaning against the garage. Whatever this was, it was clearly a large-scale family affair. I took a deep breath, grabbed the box with the cake, and entered the house. "Noelia's here," my mother called out as I walked through the door. She gave me a quick hug and took the cake from my hands. "Just in time, we're about to sit down." I looked around the living room. Claudia and Alvaro were sitting on the sofa, holding hands, whispering to each other. My father was talking to Uncle Antonio in a corner, and Aunt Beatriz, along with my cousins, was already heading to the dining room. "What's going on?" I asked Claudia as I approached. She smiled mysteriously. "You'll see." That didn't help calm my growing unease. I followed the others to the dining room where my mother had set the table with her good china, the one she only takes out at Christmas or Three Kings Day. Whatever this announcement was, it was clearly important. I sat next to my cousin Yvonne, who looked as confused as I was. "Do you know what this is about?" I whispered to him. He shook his head. "No idea. Your mother just told us to come because there was big news." The food was served: roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, and the cake I had brought was placed in the center of the table for dessert. Everyone talked about trivial things, carefully avoiding the elephant in the room. Finally, after everyone had filled their plates, my mother stood up and clinked her glass with a spoon. "I want to thank you all for coming today," she said with a big smile. "We have wonderful news to share with you." My mother stood at the head of the table. Her smile stretched unnaturally as she looked at Claudia. "Our dear Claudia is pregnant," she announced. The room erupted in applause and congratulations. Claudia blushed as Alvaro put his arm around her shoulders. "And they're getting engaged," my mother continued. "There will be a wedding very soon." I clapped along with everyone else, sincerely happy for my sister despite our complicated relationship. "Congratulations, Claudia," I said, smiling at her from across the table. But Mom wasn't finished. She exchanged a look with Dad and Claudia, then turned to me with an expression that tied my stomach in knots. "That's not all," she said, her voice cutting through the conversations. "We have another announcement." The room fell silent. Everyone looked at Mom expectantly, including me. "As you all know, Noelia recently bought an apartment," she said, pointing at me. Relatives nodded. Some mumbled a congratulations that they hadn't bothered to say when I shared the news 2 weeks ago. "Noelia is 30 years old and single," Mom continued. "No husband, no children, not even a boyfriend." I felt my face flush. What did my relationship status have to do with any of this? Claudia, however, followed Mom's lead. "Is about to start a family. She and Alvaro need a home of their own, not a rental." My heart began to pound as I understood where this was going. I glanced at Claudia and Alvaro, who were staring intently at their plates. Mom turned to me, her smile now as sharp as a knife. "Noelia, this is your opportunity to show how much you love your sister, how generous and good you are. I think you should give your apartment to Claudia and Alvaro." The dining room sank into a deathly silence. I stared at my mother in disbelief, waiting for the punchline of this horrible joke, but it never came. "You can rent again," Mom added nonchalantly, as if she wasn't asking me to give away my €300,000 apartment. "You don't need that much space just for yourself." I looked around the table. My father nodded in support of my mother. Claudia finally met my gaze with a mixture of shame and expectation on her face. "It's a wonderful idea," Aunt Beatriz chimed in. "Family should always come first." Several other relatives nodded in agreement. This wasn't a spontaneous suggestion, it was a planned ambush. "You're not serious," I finally managed to say. "Of course we are," Mom replied, her voice hardening. "Your sister needs it more than you do." I stood up slowly. The chair screeched against the floor. "Let me get this straight. You want me to give Claudia my apartment? The apartment I worked 60-hour weeks for years? The apartment I just bought with the money I inherited from Grandma and saved for 8 years? You want me to just hand it over because Claudia is pregnant?" "Don't be selfish, Noelia," my father interjected, his tone warning me to back down. "Selfish?" I laughed, though the sound seemed hollow even to me. "I worked for that apartment. Every last cent. Nobody helped me. But Claudia needs it, Mom started. I cut her off. Absolutely not. I'm not giving Claudia my apartment. It's mine. I earned it. Claudia burst into tears, theatrically bringing a hand to her belly. Alvaro glared at me as if I'd just kicked a puppy. How can you be so cruel? Mom demanded, her face red with anger. She's your own sister. And how can you ask me to give up everything I've worked for? I retorted. Why doesn't Claudia work and save like I did? The relatives began to whisper amongst themselves. I heard phrases like so materialistic and always the difficult one. It's always been like this, Mom's fat. Always thinking only of yourself. I'm not giving her my apartment, I repeated firmly. Subject closed. What happened next, I still replay in slow motion. Mom grabbed the chocolate cake I had brought, the one still untouched in the center of the table, and threw it at me with surprising force. It hit me squarely in the face, cream and chocolate splattering my cheeks, dripping down my neck, and staining my blouse. The room fell silent. I slowly wiped the frosting from my eyes, pieces of cake falling to the floor. Dad and Claudia didn't look surprised or horrified, more like satisfied, as if I'd finally gotten what I deserved. Without a word, I grabbed my purse and keys and walked out, still with cake remnants on my clothes and hair. Behind me, the shouting began. Selfish, truly, was Mom's voice. We should disinherit you, Dad yelled. How can you do this to us? Claudia sobbed. I got into my car, my hands shaking so much I could barely turn the key. Somehow, I managed to drive back home, the chocolate frosting drying on my skin. I collapsed on my old, second-hand sofa that I'd brought from my previous rented apartment and tried to process what had just happened. My phone started vibrating almost immediately. Calls and text messages from my parents and Claudia flooded the screen. You're being ridiculous. Just give her the apartment. I can't believe how selfish you're being. After everything we've done for you. Your pregnant sister needs a home. I turned off the phone and tossed it aside. And what had they done for me? My whole life had been second to Claudia. When we were kids and needed new clothes for school, Claudia got name brands while I wore whatever was on clearance. When we applied for summer camps, they found money for Claudia's art camp, but told me the debate camp I wanted was too expensive. For Claudia's 16th birthday, they threw her a huge party with a professional DJ. For mine, Mom baked a cake and 2 relatives came. And now they expected me to give away my apartment, the one thing I had accomplished entirely on my own. I thought about the house we had been sitting in just an hour ago. My grandmother's house, the same one she left to Claudia and me equally in her will. We let our parents live there out of pure kindness, never asking anything in return. I owned 50% of that house, just like Claudia, and suddenly I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I searched my filing cabinet until I found the folder labeled Grandma's Will. Inside was the document that confirmed what I already knew. Claudia and I each owned 50% of our parents' house. They lived there because we allowed it, not because they had any legal right. I was about to call a lawyer when my phone rang. It was a Facebook notification. My mother had tagged me in a post. With a growing sense of dread, I opened the app and almost dropped my phone when I read what she had written. It breaks my heart to share this, but sometimes family disappoints you in the worst ways. Yesterday, my daughter Noelia refused to help her pregnant sister, Claudia, when she needed it most. Despite having the means to help, she chose selfishness over family. As a mother, I've never felt so devastated. Please pray that Noelia finds compassion in her heart. The post had dozens of comments, mostly from relatives and family friends. I was there. Noelia was cruel to poor Claudia. There are people who don't understand what family means. What a shame. Keeping an apartment just for herself while her sister is expecting a baby. Not a single person mentioned that my mother had thrown a cake in my face. Nobody questioned why I should give away the apartment I had worked so hard for. I read the comments, each one like a stab wound. My mother wasn't just watching this unfold. She was liking and replying to the cruelest ones. She was orchestrating a public campaign of humiliation against me. That was the moment something broke inside me. The last thread of family loyalty snapped. I picked up the phone and called the first lawyer that appeared when I searched for real estate lawyer in my area. Don Francisco Law Firm. A receptionist answered. I need to speak with a lawyer about property rights, I said, my voice surprisingly firm. 2 hours later, I was sitting in front of Don Francisco, a sharp-looking man in his 50s who listened attentively as I explained my situation. Let me see if I understand, he said when I finished. You and your sister inherited a house from your grandmother. You've allowed your parents to live there rent-free. And now, after being demanded to give away your apartment and publicly humiliated for refusing, you want to know what your options are regarding that house. Correct, I confirmed. I don't want to be vengeful, but they haven't shown me any respect or consideration. I need to know what my rights are. Don Francisco reviewed the will and nodded. It's very clear. You and your sister each own 50% of the property. At any time, you can request that the house be sold and the proceeds divided between you. What would the process be? I asked. I will draft a formal notification in which you express your intention to sell your share of the property. Your sister can buy your half at fair market value, or the entire house will be put up for sale, and the profits will be divided. Your parents have no legal right to object. I took a deep breath. Do it. For the next few days, I focused on the renovations of my apartment. I had finished painting the living room and started tearing out the old carpet. The physical work helped me not think about the disaster with my family. I temporarily blocked their numbers. I needed space to think clearly without their constant harassment. A few days after my meeting with Don Francisco, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. My parents, Claudia and Alvaro, were in the hallway. I didn't open. Noelia, we know you're there, my mother yelled. Open this door right now. We need to talk about that ridiculous letter. This is crazy, my father added, his voice booming through the building. I remained silent and pressed record on my phone's voice memo app. You're completely ungrateful, my mother screamed. After everything we've done for you, you're trying to leave your pregnant sister homeless. Claudia cried. This is low, even for you, Alvaro said. I recorded every word, every threat, every insult they hurled at my door for almost 15 minutes. Finally, they gave up and left. The next day, I sent the recording to Don Francisco, who called me immediately. This is harassment, he said firmly. We can file a restraining order if necessary, but more importantly, their behavior only strengthens our position. They have clearly demonstrated hostility towards you. A week later, Don Francisco called me with news. Your parents' lawyer has been in contact. They want to mediate. The mediation was set for the following Monday at Don Francisco's office. I arrived early, dressed in my navy blue pantsuit, the one I reserve for important client meetings. Don Francisco greeted me with a reassuring smile. Remember, you have every legal right to do this, he said. Don't let them make you feel guilty. My parents, Claudia and Alvaro, arrived with their lawyer. My mother glared at me, her eyes full of contempt. Traitor, she whispered as she passed by. The lawyer spoke first, outlining the facts of the case. My parents' lawyer argued that selling the house would cause great harm to my family. Don Francisco responded by presenting the recording of the harassment and the social media posts as evidence of the treatment I had received. After almost 2 hours of back and forth, the lawyers met privately. Then they returned with a proposed agreement. The house would be sold and the proceeds divided equally between Claudia and me, as stipulated in my grandmother's will. My mother burst into tears upon hearing this. Please, Noelia, she pleaded between sobs, suddenly changing tactics. We're your family. How can you do this to us? I'm sorry about the cake. I lost my temper. I looked at her tear-streaked face and remembered all the times I had forgiven her treatment of me. All the times I had accepted being second to Claudia. I remembered the public humiliation she orchestrated, the harassment at my door, The demands that I hand over everything I had worked for. The house will be sold, I said quietly. It's final. Don Francisco nodded and began to draft the agreement. As we waited, I felt the hatred of my family cut through the air like a blade. I didn't care anymore. For the first time in my life, I was standing up for myself. 2 months passed in a whirlwind of legal paperwork and real estate visits. The house sold faster than expected. The market was hot, and the property was in a desirable area. After closing costs and taxes, Claudia and I each received a little over 175,000 euros. During that time, I didn't speak directly to my family. All communication was done through our lawyers. Don Francisco informed me that my parents were furious, but in the end, they couldn't stop the sale. They had lived for years in a property that wasn't theirs, contributing nothing beyond basic maintenance. And now what are they going to do? I asked Don Francisco in our last meeting. Your sister has decided to use her share as a down payment on a new house, he explained. Your parents will move in with her and Alvaro. They've secured a mortgage to cover the rest. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt guilty. In a way, I had forced my parents to leave their home. But another part of me, the part that remembered the cake in the face and the public humiliation, felt vindicated. And what are you going to do? Don Francisco asked me. Any plans for your share? I'm working with a financial advisor to set up a diversified portfolio, stocks, bonds, and real estate funds, I replied. Good decision, he nodded approvingly. Well, if there's nothing else, I think we're finished. I shook his hand. Thank you for everything. Leaving his office, I felt lighter, as if I had left behind a weight I had been carrying for years. The weight of always being the responsible one, the one who gave in, the one who sacrificed. Back in my apartment, I looked at everything I had accomplished. The renovation was almost finished. I had replaced the carpet with hardwood floors, painted all the rooms, updated the kitchen with new appliances, and installed modern lights in every corner. It no longer resembled the place I bought 3 months ago. Now it was truly mine, in every sense. The phone rang. It was a friend from work. Hi, Sarah, I answered. How are you? Noelia, her voice sounded concerned. We chatted briefly about all the family drama. She had seen my red eyes at the office after the cake incident. I'm fine, actually, I said. And as I said it, I realized it was true. The sale of the house had closed. The money was in my account. And your family? That's still a mess, right? I sighed. I haven't spoken to any of them. I hear things through mutual acquaintances. What kind of things? Claudia's wedding was last month, a small ceremony, just close family. I paused. I wasn't invited, obviously. I'm so sorry, Noelia. Don't be. I wouldn't have gone even if they had invited me. I'm serious. It seems she's due next week. It's a boy. And you're really okay with all of this? With not knowing your nephew? I thought for a second. Do you really think, believing I'm the villain of some family drama, they'll tell him that his horrible Aunt Noelia didn't want to give him her apartment and force them to sell the house? They won't mention how they treated me my whole life. Sarah was silent for a moment. Families are complicated. That's an understatement. I laughed humorlessly. The truth, Sarah, is I don't think they ever saw me as family, only as someone useful, someone who sacrifices when needed. Do you think they'll ever reconcile? Not unless they acknowledge what they did and sincerely apologize. And I knew that would never happen. My parents spent their whole lives favoring Claudia. They weren't going to discover self-criticism now that they were approaching 60. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of wine and went out to the small balcony. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I would be estranged from my entire family, I would have been devastated. But now I felt strangely at peace. My phone vibrated. It was a message from another mutual friend. Claudia had the baby. 3.3 kilograms. All is well. I stared at the screen, waiting to feel something. Sadness. anger, remorse. But all I felt was distant acknowledgement, as if I were reading news about an acquaintance, not my own sister. I knew they were all living together now. Claudia, Alvaro, the baby, and my parents. In the house they bought with Claudia's share and a 30-year mortgage. They'd be paying it well into their retirement, but I couldn't feel sorry for them. They had already clearly shown me where I stood in their lives. I wasn't a daughter, or a sister, or an aunt. I was a resource, a wallet, as I'd thought that day with the cake dripping down my face. My apartment was silent when I went back inside. Some would call it loneliness. I called it peace. The walls I painted, the floor I installed. Every inch of this place represented my independence, my decision to never let myself be used again. On my bookshelf rested a small box. It contained the only family photos I kept, photos of my grandmother and me. She always treated us equally. Maybe she saw what was happening, how my parents favored Claudia and wanted to balance things out, leaving us equal shares of her house. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered, gently touching the box. As for the rest of my family, I had no desire to seek them out. The ball was in their court, and I suspected it would stay there forever. I was done making sacrifices for people who would never do the same for me. I always thought family was unconditional love and support. Now I understood that true family, whether by blood or not, would never ask you to burn yourself to keep them warm. They would never throw a cake in your face for refusing to burn. My phone remained silent. No call from my mother asking for forgiveness. No message from my father acknowledging his favoritism. No text from Claudia thanking me for the years I spent in her shadow without complaint. And that was okay. I had my apartment, my investments, my career, and friends who truly cared about me. I had a life to build on my own,